Hey, welcome to the Shop, Graham.
Howdy.
So, this will be our 4th episode.
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, it will be our 4th episode.
And as of yesterday, I just put this thing up so that it would distribute out to, the podcast sphere. And so far, initial reactions of people have been good.
Good.
I don't know how many people actually listen to it
Yeah.
yet. But
all 3 of them love it.
that first, yes, listener. Yeah.
Thank you.
The listener. So, and I think that, I had a chance to listen to it. Mm-hmm. I listened to our first podcast like 4 times. I had a chance to listen to it in the car and then just on my phone. And, I think it comes across good. I think we're faking it pretty good here.
Yeah, well, you fake it till you make it. And that's always been my experience.
So. Well, if you could truncate that faking period into, as
period,
short as you can. So I feel like at this point we're in the real make it. And just if it's going to be talking about just general stuff that we deal with here at Heel Toe and automotive enthusiast things, I was thinking, what are we going to talk about today? And I was actually taking some photographs of product, and I have some PLM parts that just came in.
Cool.
I'm trying to do this thing where I take pictures of all the stuff that I've got, multiple pictures, detail shots.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I'm just really trying to differentiate our store so that it looks different than the next guy's store. Because anybody that sells PLM, most of them are going to have the same picture that PLM has on their website.
Yeah, and that always drove me batty as a buyer, being like, this is a generic photo of an exhaust, You
can totally tell.
What is, just when I was looking for a Fiesta exhaust, I was like, does this one have a double tip, a single tip? Is it, what is it actually made of? And depending on what site you're on, it's a different photo, but it's always just a generic photo. It's really obvious that they didn't pull it out of a box.
And to be honest with you, pulling an exhaust system out of a box or a coilover kit out of a box to take the pictures, it's really a pain in the ass. It takes a long time.
No doubt.
It takes a long time, and then you got to pack it back up again so as to make it look like you didn't just do that.
Yeah.
I had somebody get pissed at me a few weeks ago. The floor mat guy. Yeah. We sent this guy some floor mats, and he was like, "Oh, these were open previously. Were you just doing regular quality checks?" And I said, "Well, they come from Honda. We know they're good quality."
Yeah.
I was actually using it to take pictures, and he started grilling me. "Well, I don't know. I looked at your website while we're talking. It's the same picture that it was before. So what's up? I don't appreciate you opening." I'm like, "Oh man, really?"
Big deal.
I guess on a certain level, I kind of understand, but we're talking about not necessarily hard to get floor mats that your feet go on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I feel like condition kind of says anything on that. You know?
I don't know. I felt a little bad, but also he was being rude enough that I felt not bad at all. So,
you went in feeling bad and you left being like, well, okay, all right. Maybe he's just kind of a jerk.
Yeah, it could be. Maybe we'll meet in the middle.
Yeah. He's persnickety.
I should have sent him the other one. Anyway, that's a little off topic. I'm taking these pictures, right? Mm-hmm. And I had the PLM.
I'll be our time master today.
Oh, what do you?
5:32.
Are we trying to monitor our time?
We gotta just keep some track.
Folks, we don't really know how long to make this podcast. I've listened to them that are 10, 15 minutes, and I'll listen to 50 of them, or one of them. And then I've got some that are an hour. And then just when I hop in my car, it starts playing. And then, maybe it takes me 3 or 4 trips to get through a whole episode. But I don't really necessarily have a problem with either one. Mm-hmm. Just this is sort of like an open conversation format that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that some topics are just going to be longer than others.
Yeah, well, of course.
Listener, if you have a preference for how long you would like your podcast to be, let us know. Can't promise you we're going to stick to that at all.
Yeah, but we'll keep it in mind.
Yep. So, that being said, okay, so where was I? Oh, taking the pictures. I had this PLM J-pipe, and for the exact same application, I knew that I had in the back an RV6 branded J-pipe.
Cool.
Now, we already know that PLM is private label manufacturing, which is sort of their nice way of saying these are Chinese rip-off parts. Let's just call a spade, right? Nobody thinks that PLM is innovating anything, and if they do, they're just naive and incorrect. They're just wrong, right? But hey, that's part of the industry. RV6 has developed their own products. They build many things in the United States. They get some stuff from overseas too, but the quality is very good. They put extra time and attention. they cost more clearly than
Yeah.
a knockoff part. But it led me to say, well, let's take pictures of both. And then I had them both in front of me so that I could see some of the differences between the two.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not here today to enumerate the differences between a PLM J-pipe
Yeah,
and
the
an RV6
specific
J-pipe.
thing, yeah.
But it's a question that comes up all the time. Like, I've got the legit part right here, the one that everybody at least wants to have. And then I've got the cheap alternative, the one that people want to buy.
Yeah, brand A and brand B.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I want to buy this one because it appears to be the same thing but for less money, but I want to have that other one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But, so what do we do? For a long time, I was staunchly against selling the PLM brand just because I know that they don't really innovate their own stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a few things that they do.
But
And I
overwhelmingly-
sell the product, and if the owner of PLM hears this and gets pissed, guess what, dude? You copy stuff. Like,
Sorry.
nobody feels bad for you.
Sorry you don't
okay?
like how you work.
I'm sorry you don't like your business model, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pride that goes into the RV6 parts.
Yeah.
And you know what? There's a lot of putting parts in people's hands on the PLM front. So which one is right? Which one should you do? What's right? What's wrong?
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid question. It's something that I've struggled with a lot as I've kind of grown up in car-dumb. Is like, at 20, I'm like, oh my God, this is killing me. Like, how much is that header? It's, $600, $700. It's insane. So I not only looked like for a DC Sports, but I looked for like a used DC Sports, and I'm like, well, I get like a real low mileage.
Which is funny that you say that because when I started doing this, DC Sports wasn't only the best brand; it was like the brand.
The brand?
There were iBox springs, Coney shocks, DC headers, maybe 3 or 4 different intakes.
funny.
RS Akamoto DC intakes, and AEM was just starting.
Yeah.
It's just funny to hear that DC was where we settle.
And that's where
Nowadays.
that's where I personally settle. There's always lower, cheaper stuff. There's like Agency Power, I think.
Agency Power is an in-house brand for Vivid Racing.
Okay.
So, and at least it was when it started. I don't know if
There's
it's
there's a bunch of other cheap brands
I don't
too.
think that's a necessarily cheap brand, but I think it's a store trying to make more money by having their own brand.
Well, I can tell you on the Subaru platform, their stuff was half the price of everything else.
Yeah.
And it was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, there's got to be a reason, right? And that's the problem. Like you were just talking about, you only have these generic photos. It's like, even if you had really detailed comparison photos, most people, especially just laymen and cheap laymen, people who just showed up to the party kind of, they don't really appreciate what the hell that extra $500 buys.
Well, to be very blunt about it, a lot of people these days, I could have put both J pipes in front of them, and they would have had a hard ass time telling me which one was the quote unquote better one.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Like they're both made of metal.
Yeah.
The PLM one's a little shinier. The welds on the RV6 ones are a little, have a little bit more of the pretty coloring.
Yeah.
But I mean, until you really know what to look for, you might not even really notice much of a difference.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I remember reading about grades of steel in headers.
Yeah.
And I don't recall everything I read about it, but when I was looking at Subaru headers, I was like, why the hell would this header set be like $1,500 where you can get these other ones for like a couple hundred? Some of it was the way it was designed, like the tube lengths and the primary lengths and that kind of stuff. And then some of it was the weight of the steel that they'd used, how they had welded it, MIG, TIG, etc.
Yeah.
And all these things are so nuanced that, it's like, unless you really breathe and sleep and eat this stuff,
you may not know.
Yeah.
And so you kind of just have to take the prices and the people's word for it.
Yeah, and you just kind of go, I guess that's worth more because it's more expensive.
Well, what I would share between the two J-pipe experiences that I had opening them up is, there's all kinds of RV6 branding inside the RV6 box. The part has like a laser cutout, one of the brackets, it has their laser logo lasered into it, and then there's got a little plaque on it that says what it is and what it's for. The PLM, nothing, right?
Yeah.
But it was made the same way, right? Like it had the same little cut and splice sections around some of the really tight turns. It looked like the same pipe made by somebody else.
Sure.
So that's just without measuring anything. And I do with some of these pictures, one of the things that if I'm taking the time to open the pipe and take all these detailed pictures, I'll get out my caliper and measure the flanges. And so you can see, the outlet of this one is this side, the outlet of this one is that size. There are a little bit of variance between the two, to just sort of, they're made differently by different people, but it's one of those situations where if I didn't have the opportunity to see both of these in front of me, and I'm looking at them both on the internet, and one of them is $350 or $400, and the other one is $450 or $500.
Who would know?
And then the customer asked me, well, what's the difference? And I could say, well, the RV6 gaskets are much nicer. It comes with more and a little bit better hardware. The fabrication is a little nicer. Integrity-wise, is one going to break more than the other? I don't know. It's hard to say, right?
Yeah.
Anybody can have a failure like that.
And it varies by use, too.
I put a little bit of a teaser for this podcast up in the Heel Toe Corner Facebook group. And, I got a few people like, I'm all RV6. And then I got a few people that were like, I've got PLM. And one guy said, well, they're both quote-unquote stainless, but the RV6 one, it's a better grade. Getting back to your metallurgy question or statement. The stainless steel that PLM uses will show all kinds of surface rust and it'll look kind of ugly after a very short period of time. I haven't seen that myself. That's just what this guy said. Hey, you know what? And I've seen that too. I've seen, this is aluminum. And then it develops like surface rust. Like,
and you're like,
well, it sure feels like aluminum. It's really light but why is it rusting? That seems weird. So these materials that they use in sort of your alternative manufacturing, you never really 100% know what it is. RV6, when they buy their material, they're getting it from a steel mill in a certain grade, and it's got to be that grade. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a reputable steel company. Presumably, that's where they're a reputable company. So just the material cost alone is going to bump you up into a different price category for a product. That alone could double the cost. All these little things that RV6 does that PLM doesn't do, it adds up to a pretty big cost difference. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if PLM made more money per pipe than RV6 does. Even though the pipe on the RV6 side is more expensive. But what it really leads to is this bigger conversation of which one should I buy? Right?
Is it worth it to me?
I think that to answer that question, it really comes down to what are you trying to do with the car? And what kind of car enthusiast are you?
Well, and what kind of money do you have too? Because I've always thought of myself as somewhat uncompromising, but when I was younger, I compromised it.
But there's an age component there. With age comes appreciation for what your money is worth to you, number one. And also it comes with the experience of knowing that this is the difference between part A and part B. Where do you get that experience from? From a history of buying shitty parts. Right? So if you have spent more time with lesser grade parts, eventually you're going to learn the lesson that you are paying more for something that is a little bit better, and you'll be able to better make those decisions of, is this purchase worth the extra money to me, right, in my particular car? This comes up a lot with wheels. Right? There are the replica wheels, which, sidebar, there are no such thing as fake wheels. They're all real wheels.
It's a real wheel.
It's all real. But there are replicas, reproductions, rip-offs, versus what is called the genuine article. Genuine, right? Genuine meaning it is that actual brand as it is represented. Unlike you brought in this Tial wastegate.
Yes, I brought in a prop to tell a little story.
Audio listener, you'll have to take our word for it. But I am holding in my hand a honest to goodness Tial wastegate.
38 millimeter.
Apparently it's not a real Tial one.
It's not. No, and I learned that the hard way.
So this is grams. Okay, so the little story with this wastegate.
So I had an 07 WRX I was building up, and I got an up pipe for a 38 millimeter wastegate. Now, I'd already spent myself pretty stupid at this point, just on all the other shit that I was putting on the car. I had a turbo, header, all this stuff, fuel system. And I was like, man, I would just love to find a cheap wastegate. Because, you know, it's a hunk of metal. It's got a giant piece of spring in it. Like, it's not rocket science. They don't really wear down that much as long as the mileage isn't, you know, 100,000 miles. Or
trying to save a couple bucks.
Yeah, and
because it's not like, you know, getting a used turbo is a little sketchy.
Yeah, it gets a little freaky, but you know, it's just a big flange with some vacuum ports, and as long as it all looked good to me, I was going to buy it. So I was looking around on eBay, and you know, eBay's tough because it's like you find these blatant knockoffs of these kind of things, and you think to yourself, well, I don't really want to knock off wastegate monitoring my boost pressure on this car that
like it doesn't need to be amazing, but it also doesn't need to be, you know.
Well, yeah, you don't want to roll the dice on some of this stuff. So I was like, I'll get a used one. I found one on Craigslist, $100. So like $200 off, and the guy said he was using it on like a Ford Ranger or something, but I was like, cool, it should work for my purposes. Get it all together, put the car together, trailer it to the shop, and I could just never, and I assumed it was user error, I just could not get the V-band flanges to sit properly on this damn thing. It was supposed to go, you know, up pipe and then dump. And
2 ports.
And the dump would go on, but just barely. I couldn't quite screw it down, and then I just could not get the flange on the up pipe properly. And I bought a really nice up pipe, so I was like, it's got to be this, right? So I had the guys at Cobb sort through this, try and figure it out, and they attempted this multiple times, different flanges, different like tools and things to stuff down in there because it's pretty cramped. And then eventually they were like, why don't we just sell you a new one just so that we can be totally certain? And as they pulled it out of the box to sell me the new one, they started comparing it. And that was when they realized that this was actually a knockoff.
Yeah.
The shape of the A and the I is all just a little different. Some of the letter height is a little different. But I mean, this thing even has it cast into... Like, this is a very
They put a lot of energy into this thing,
Yeah, it's really sophisticated. And I thought at
first... know they've got to get in there and replicate the packaging and all this when it's a new product.
And I thought this was maybe like a Gen 1 or something, but it's not. It's not at all. It's just a really sophisticated knockoff.
Yeah, so knockoff, not fake.
Yeah.
Right, so it certainly would work if you welded directly to it, whatever. Or maybe it wouldn't be a good idea. Who knows?
I don't know what springs in it, really, and it calls all these other things into question.
Exactly.
Because you judge it by its look at first.
Right.
And then you begin to realize, what is this the same grade of steel?
Right.
Is that the same spring?
Yeah.
Is it the same diaphragm?
Right.
You know, who knows?
Yeah, you really don't know.
Yeah.
And then this is why there's a big push to like no fake parts, right? You want to get the genuine article.
Well, and I can say, like, the scariest fake part in my experience or my line of thinking is easily racing seats and harnesses.
Yeah.
That is terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Because that is literally your lifeline in a crash. And, just because it looked like carbon fiber or it looked like whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time even...
Carbon Kevlar.
Yeah, any kind of a carbon seat. Like, they're good, but, if I'm not spending at least couple $1,000s, it doesn't seem like I'm probably not getting a great seat.
And do you want to find out what it means to have a bad seat when you crash?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to figure that out.
No, not at all. Or wheels, again, is another really good example.
Yeah.
We've seen the wheel failures and stuff. That kind of thing can happen to even the best wheels.
Sure.
But, there's a difference between if I'm getting something that's a knockoff, I'm getting something that's merely just made differently, such as a cast wheel versus a forged wheel. There are plenty of automotive builds out there where it might be like sexy and fashionable and awesome to get some like forged Volk wheels. But it's not really necessary for many people's cars. And so just because you haven't plunked all the way down for that, maybe you went down the scale into a nice cast wheel, that's perfectly fine too.
NKs or something like that.
NKs or Koenigs. All great wheels that don't necessarily break the bank because they don't have the most exotic manufacturing process.
They're not forged or molded.
But also, they're made well. They've got a good reputation for quality and durability.
Yeah.
So when it comes to buying the parts, whether it's fake or genuine, you definitely want to have a genuine, not a knockoff part, if you can. Certain copycat wheel companies, like Rota,
Rota's
is
the
one of
classic,
Rota's the
yeah.
number one,
Yeah.
right? Which have always had somewhat of a, you know,
They
a
shatter
side
like
glance.
glass. They shatter like glass.
Yeah, but you know what? They're not out of business.
No,
they
I know.
make tons of wheels. I think they're actually probably pretty decent wheels. They just can't come
Yeah.
up with their own designs.
Yeah, well, because there's a lot of research and development that goes into that.
Well,
You know,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
the iconic looking wheel like a Desmond or like a Mugen MF8 or MF10
Yeah.
or the TE37 or any number of wheels that Rota has knocked off. Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of originality. So, you know, are those wheels appropriate to buy, right? That's where you start getting and say like, well, the wheel company is reputable enough to make a good wheel. They don't have a penchant for breaking all the time.
Yeah.
However, if you buy a replica wheel, you're basically going to build a replica cool car. That ultimately is what the reality of it is. So if you're younger, just getting started, maybe your car isn't even really that nice, but you do want to buy some wheels for
Yeah.
it. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting something that's, you know, a cheaper wheel,
Yeah.
even I dare say a knockoff wheel, as long as it's not trying to present itself as the genuine article, which Rota never does.
No.
They don't try to sell a wheel that's like, you know, it's always been a slipstream. It's not an SW388 spoon wheel.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between and you know, and even like what PLM is doing, they're calling it their own J-pipe. You know, they're not trying to pass it off as
Another person.
or better J-pipe.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, in my day job, I do graphic design and I make packaging for a lot of things that come in from China, and there are an enormous amount of what you would call knockoffs, and it's basically like they took the original part, they studied it, and then they kind of just
Reverse engineered
They
it.
made it similar.
Well, right.
Never the same. And it's hard to appreciate the quality that you lose until you have broken it or it has failed.
Yeah.
Or it has let you down somewhere.
You got to run through that a couple of times sometimes. You know, I don't have any specific examples to give right now, but I've just bought enough car parts and used them on my car to know that, you know, okay, I'm just doing this. I can cheap out a little bit. I don't really care. If it doesn't fit, I'll make it fit. It's not a big deal, right? I can take that, you know, so-called risk of the part not being the greatest and know what I'm getting into. The difference between me now and me 30 years ago, well, that's too many years. Maybe 20-ish years ago, 25 years ago, is that the person back then didn't really know how to handle it when something didn't work right.
Yeah.
So I had to learn that kind of thing. And so I think that there's actually is a place in the market for some of these cheaper alternative products because that's the young people need to buy those parts.
Yeah.
It's the same people that get the McDonald's jobs, you know, like these jobs are there for people who are starting out to learn. You're supposed to get a crappy job at first. And McDonald's may be a fine place to work. I wouldn't know because I never worked there. But it's not as nice as, you know, stepping up the rung and getting into a better company and a better job. That escalation happens as you grow and mature. And when you do that growth and maturity, you understand, you know, first of all, you can afford more because you make more money.
Yeah,
and then second of all, because you have been around the block enough times to know that not to cheap out on this or that.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be young. I said youth people, but some people just get into this car modifying thing, you know, in their middle or late 30s.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily know why one part costs more than the other.
Yeah, I know. That can be really hard to catch up on, honestly. Because, like, if you started getting into the car game when you were in your teens, then some of this stuff becomes second nature by the time you're, like, mid-20s. But, yeah, if you enter at 30, it's like you've already kind of occupied so much of your time with all these other things. Maybe you have a family and kids and all this stuff. And it's like, even to commit the kind of time and research to figure out what the difference is in stainless steel grades or
what are you going to do? You're going to go online and just poke around in a Facebook group, and then what are they going to tell you?
Yeah.
Whatever they've got.
All kinds of
And you know,
nonsense.
you never know who you're talking to. This is a big pet peeve of mine, is that you get somebody asking a question in a forum.
Yeah.
You don't know who that person is.
Yeah.
And then you get the answers, and hell, you don't know who the people answering are either.
Yeah.
So you got people who are potentially inexperienced and not only really doing what other people have told them to do, giving advice to other folks who maybe have more experience and don't have the same level of perspective.
Yeah.
It's a shit show.
It is, yeah. I think that the only way that I ever felt that I had actually learned something on the internet was once I'd heard it like 10 times, from multiple sources all over the place. I'm like, okay, this seems to corroborate this. It's kind of like when you're getting like an eyewitness statement. If you're like a cop, and you're like, what color is the car? And you're like, oh, it's blue. And then you ask the next guy, he's like, oh, it's definitely pink.
It was silver for sure.
But then, you ask 10 people, how many people said silver? How many people said blue? How many people said pink?
Yeah.
We could reasonably assume...
Probably blue.
We could reasonably assume that, if everybody seemed to agree, majority, that it was blue, it becomes a little bit more of a fact.
More of a fact to them in that situation.
And but that's what it's like on the internet.
It kind of can be. But ultimately, here we are wandering around, don't necessarily know if the information we're getting is good.
No.
And... if things don't really add up, at some point you just have to pull the trigger. So in order to know what's really the right one for you, sometimes you just have to, just whip out the card and buy the thing and understand that, a car like my TSX, for example, I've got a lot of TSX customers and they'll pine over what's the right header to get? What's the best header to get?
Yeah.
And you know what? I've had like 4 different headers on my car. I've had 3 different suspension systems at least, and I need to put another one. I've had 3 different exhaust systems. Listen, if you're really deep in the enthusiast game, this isn't a one-time purchase anyway.
No.
So
never.
You could spend the rest of your life going, batty over which one should I buy, when ultimately the best thing you could do is probably just pick what seems like the best to you.
Yeah.
Get a little public opinion. Call your store, your dealer like Heel Toe Automotive, and say, hey, what do you think of this or that? Hey, what do you think of the PLM? Hey, you know what? They fit. There's questionable fitment concerns. People have different feedbacks. Obviously, it's metal. It's welded. It ain't going to fall apart. Could you have a failure at some point?
Of course.
Sure, you could.
Yeah.
But you know what? You're saving a bunch of money up front, too. So if you don't really care about the brand, and if that's the other thing that the brand brings, I'll get to in a second. But if you don't really care about that, then sure, don't spend the extra money. Then knowing in the back of my head that I'd done that person right by giving them advice and saying, like, if these are your important factors, it'll work fine, right? Now, RV6, I told you about all the logos and branding that were inside the package, and they give you like little candy. They used to give you a little magnet, and they're just nice. And the people that run that company, Rich and Ling, are just such nice people. They're like some of the nicest people in this industry, right? You almost kind of join a club of people that have invested and have that level of pride in their project. So if you're trying to build a car that you're really proud of, and part of that pride, if you leave the fact that I didn't spend that much money on this on the table, right? If you kind of like put that aside, because that is a thing to be proud of too. But if you kind of take that spend out of the equation and just look at the product, and you really say, hey, you know what? I love this car. I got it. It was the first. I'm the second owner.
Yeah.
It's in amazing condition. I can't believe I found this whatever 2010 TL all-wheel drive in this kind of condition.
Yeah.
Do you really want to do that car that way?
Cheap way.
Yeah, you're going to do it the cheap way?
Yeah.
Or are you going to, maybe take a little bit more time? That car's been on the planet long enough. It ain't getting any older now.
Yeah.
You could do it right and do it nice and have some pride in it. And, I really can't see having the pride angle on a PLM part. I just really can't.
Yeah.
I can see buying it because it's the only one that's available. Former employee David, he built a Prelude and he needed a header. And DC stopped making them. He couldn't get one.
Yeah.
The PLM was the only place that had one for his car. And so you know what? He was pretty happy to get that.
An H22?
H22, yeah. He was pretty happy to get that header. And you know what? He and I have similar feelings about this. And he really did not want to buy a PLM header. But you know what? He did because he had to. And it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah. I mean, it's really... It gets so nitpicky sometimes trying to figure out what the day-to-day difference would be, having spent, top
none.
dollar versus bottom dollar.
There is none.
Yeah.
But you know, in certain circles.
Yeah.
You know, or car show, certain circles. Oh yeah, you know, knockoff stuff, and then you're just going to get a sideways glance, and people won't necessarily be rude to you, right? But you won't get the respect or the street cred.
Sure.
So maybe you don't care about that either. But
yeah, I think, at least for me personally, I feel like there is, you know, kind of a range, and you've got outliers that are insanely expensive and ridiculously cheap, and I'm very wary of either end of that scale.
No,
I'm
stay
like,
right in the middle.
let's stay somewhere in the middle of the pack, you know, where you wouldn't necessarily regret it. Maybe you'd wonder if, you know, the next rung up was a little better, but you won't really regret it. It won't keep you up at night.
Yeah.
But like for the Evo, you know, you can find exhausts as cheap as like $300 to $400 on eBay, or you can find them up to $4,000, like a full titanium exhaust system with carbon fiber cans, and it's mental, you know. And I'm looking at it like, how could this possibly be?
How does this even exist?
Yeah, how could this possibly be worth this kind of money?
Yeah.
But, you know, street cred for some people.
Well, street cred.
It's about, and you know, if you're trying to put this into a show.
Every once in a while, you're going to get to a point where every little gram matters.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it seems a little silly to talk about it in that respect, but, you know, people get obsessive about it. It's a hobby.
Yeah, yeah.
People get obsessive about these sorts of things.
And you know, you have show experience. I don't personally, but I know that if you're going to put your car on show, if you had some super rare exhaust system on it, everybody would stop and take a photo.
Yeah, people are interested in that. Yeah. The type of wheels that you have, whether or not they're genuine, what era they're from.
Yeah.
You know, especially when we're getting in a place now where the originality of things is becoming much more appreciated. Well, some of these, more cheaply made products just simply don't last as long.
Yeah.
So, you know, what ends up being coveted, you know, your Mugen parts, spoon parts of different generations, stuff that actually can stand the test of time.
Yeah.
You know, and become known brands over a long period of time. You know, people don't necessarily remember the cheap thing that came off of eBay. You know, it's just not like that kind of thing. And this could be like a blue sky sort of conversation at this point. Of course, if I'm building a show car, I'm not going to build it on eBay parts. But the reality is that there are places for these parts. People must buy cheap eBay knockoff parts so that they can truly appreciate the extra time and energy and effort that goes into our more legitimate and solid brands. So I carry the PLM product. I would necessarily prefer to sell, you know, to a TSX guy, a DC header, or, you know, an ASP header. But, you know, I sell a lot of Weapon R, and I sell PLM. And, you know, there's just a level for everybody. And I've got to be good with that, giving the market what it wants. But if somebody's going to ask me which one they should buy, I'm going to ask them some of these questions. And hopefully that will help them get to the part that's right for them, which is really what our tagline, you know, personalized Honda and Acura enthusiast parts. You know, there's a personalization that comes with building a car. And it's important to know, should I spend the money here or should I not?
Are you, I mean, and really it's like, are you going to care? You know? Are you going to care? Because you're the one that drives it every day. You're the one that's going to park it at the end of the day and turn out the lights in the garage. And, you know, that's you. This is your car. So are you going to be okay with it?
Totally.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was the topic. You know, just came up today, and I thought it would be a good thing to talk about. You know, I've got so many of these things that I would love to talk about, and I just think planning an episode out, one topic will come to me that day, I'm positive.
This is a universal topic too. I mean, it's something that you have to face every time you build a car. And even as you get older and your decisions change, you still have to make them every time.
Absolutely. Well, you know, Heel Toe's here. The internet groups are there. We do have the Heel Toe Corner Facebook group, which I'm not pressuring you to join or anything like that. But the people that are in that group, it started with a curated set of people that I know of all kinds of different walks of cardom and lifedom. And I don't think you would ever get bad advice in there, just some perspective. And, you know, it's a good place to maybe ask some questions if you want to. Otherwise, you know, you can call or text Heel Toe, email us, and we'll give you some opinions, whatever it's worth, you know, to you. Or you could just click around and do what everybody else says to do. Either way.
Yeah. Or just buy something.
Or just buy something.
Roll the
All right.
dice.
Well, folks, thanks for listening, and hope you join us for the next one.
Yeah, take it easy.
Bye.